Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English, and this is the first lecture of Economy Simplified. Now you need to understand, in Economy Simplified we are going to build up your concepts as far as economy subject is concerned, both for your prelims as well as mains examination. Now before going deep into Indian economy, we'll start with the Reserve Bank of India, which is India's central bank. But before that, you need to know the fundamental difference between a commercial bank and a central bank. Now, how many of you have heard the name of State Bank of India? How many of you have heard of State Bank of India? I'm 100% sure almost all of you must have heard about this bank. There's also a chance that you might have visited one of the branches or ATMs of India's largest bank, that is the State Bank of India. Now, this bank offers many services. You can open a bank account, you can open a fixed deposit account, you can open a savings bank account. This bank also gives you credit card, debit card, etc. so that you can make your online payment, right? So this is the purpose of a normal bank like State Bank of India. Similarly, there are private banks also, ICICI, HDFC, Axis. These are few names of commercial banks, right? So these are all what you can call a commercial bank. But now, how many of you have heard the name Reserve Bank of India? Now, what do you think is the fundamental difference between State Bank and Reserve Bank? First of all, the name bank is attached to both of their names. So what makes RBI different than SBI? Ever heard about that idea? No, right? So let me tell you what is the fundamental difference between a central bank and a commercial bank. Although the name itself might be a misnomer, both of them have the names bank attached to it. But do you think you can go to an RBI and open a bank account? The answer is no. Why is these different? Let us find out in our today's discussion. Now we'll try to compare these two institutions based on certain criteria. So we'll try to compare central banks with that of commercial banks, right? Now let us understand the fundamental difference. First, what is the meaning of a central bank? Any idea? Now, central bank in any economy serves as an apex institution responsible for regulation and management of India's banking sector, and this same is true even with respect to other economies. So I can say central bank is an apex institution. Just like you've heard Apex Court of India, Supreme Court, it oversees the management and working of all the other courts in the country. Similarly, RBI, it is an apex bank of India. Being the central bank, RBI is responsible for regulation of all the commercial banks in India, which means commercial banks or all commercial banks, they function under the central bank, right? So this is the difference between central bank and a commercial bank. Central bank is at the top, commercial bank are somewhat below, regulated once again by the apex, that is the central bank. Now, when was RBI established? Any guesses? Now, RBI itself was established because of an act passed by Parliament known as RBI Act of 1934. Any idea which Parliament passed this act? It was the British Parliament. Why? Because in 1934, RBI India at that time was under colonial rule. Similarly, banks in India, they continue to be set up based on different acts. For example, commercial banks in India, now you must have known, are divided into two categories. First are private sector banks. Second are owned by government, known as public sector banks. And public sector banks, they are set up based on an act passed by Indian Parliament. So for example, SBI, it was formed due to an act passed by Indian Parliament, SBI Act of the year 1955. Similarly, other PSBs, they were set up based on an act of Indian Parliament known as Bank Nationalization Act of 1970 and 1980. 1970 brought or made or nationalized 14 banks in India. Similarly, in 1980, the Bank Nationalization Act of 1980 nationalized 6 private sector bank into public sector banks. Now, nationalization is basically opposite of privatization. In privatization, you sell the ownership of the company which earlier belonged to the government to a private sector. That is called as privatization of the company. On the opposite, if the ownership of any company transfers from private hands into government hands, that part is called as nationalization. So, at the time of Indira Gandhi, Bank Nationalization Act of 1970 was passed, which nationalized 14 different banks in India. Similarly, in 1980, 6 different private sector banks were nationalized. So this is how public sector banks are being set up. Now, private sector banks in India, they are set up under Companies Act, right? So this is the fundamental difference between the apex bank and the commercial banks. Commercial banks can be set up by different laws of the parliament, whereas RBI has a separate act which makes it what kind of a body? A statutory body. I'm hoping all of you know what is a statutory body, right? Statutory body is a kind of a body which gets its power directly from a statute passed by the parliament, that is the Act of 1934, RBI Act of 1934. Got this? So this was the primary two differences, but there are other differences also. What are the other differences? Let us find out. Another criteria based on which we can differ these two banks are the objective these institutions want to fulfill, right? Now, what is the objective of Central Bank of India? Any idea? First of all, RBI has dual objective. Its primary objective is to control inflation in India, and its secondary objective is to promote growth in India's economy. Now, what do you think would be the objective of commercial banks? Now, you need to know commercial banks, as the name suggests, they work on the principle of what is known as profit maximization, right? So it is the objective of profit maximization based on which commercial banks work. But you need to understand government had set up public sector banks for certain intentions, and this intention was to ensure welfare and financial inclusion in India. So primary objective of public sector banks is to ensure welfare and financial inclusion, while at the same time they are corporate in nature. So I can also say their objective or intention is also to make profit or to maximize their profit, right? So this is the fundamental differences between central and commercial bank. Now let us consider the another criteria, that is the ownership, right? So what is the difference between ownership? Now RBI continues to be owned by government. So the ownership of RBI 100% rests with which government? Government of India. And we'll find out, as government is the 100% owner of RBI, whatever profit RBI makes, a portion of that profit is transferred to the government. How that portion is decided, that is a separate issue known as economic capital framework. We'll cover it later on. Okay. Now ownership of commercial banks can either be public, that is government owned, or it can be privately owned, right? So this is another difference between the two. Now any other criteria that you can think of? Another criteria that I can think of, the difference between the two is relating to banknotes. Now central bank has another responsibility. It is responsible for printing of banknotes in India. So all the banknotes ranging from rupees 2 to rupees 2000, this is printed by the RBI, that is the Central Bank of India. Now any idea what is the role of commercial banks in this regard? What do commercial banks do with respect to banknotes? It is responsible, or it is involved in distribution of banknotes. So whenever we have to get banknotes, do you think we go directly to the central bank or we go to commercial banks? We go to commercial banks. We use our ATM, we use our deposit slip or cash withdrawal slip. to take money out of the commercial banks, right? So this is another difference. Now, any idea how is the relation with public with respect to these two types of institutions? Do you think you can go directly to RBI and open a bank account? The answer obviously is no. So in that regard, central bank has no relations with public. Whereas on the other hand, commercial banks, they act as banker to the public. They act as banker to the public. So you can go open a savings bank account and keep your salaries in it. You can open a fixed deposit account and keep your savings in it. So these banks, they accept deposits, and in other hand also give loans to customers, right? So this is the another difference between commercial bank and central bank. Central bank has no relations with public. It acts as a banker, but it acts as a banker to government and other banks. On the other hand, commercial banks, they are acting as a banker to commercial enterprises, to individuals like you and I, right? So this is another difference. Now, what is the role of central bank and commercial banks in Indian economy? Central banks, they act as bankers to both government, both state and central government, as well as other banks in India. So whenever banks are short in funds and they need loans, they can also approach the central bank, that is in India's case RBI. Whereas the role of commercial bank is that they act as banker to public, which we have already understood. You can go open a deposit account, you can go to a bank and ask for loans also, right? Now, any idea of the famous examples of central banks? In addition, you already know RBI, that I know. Any idea which is world's oldest central bank? Is it US's Federal Reserve? The answer is no. The oldest central bank in the world is Swedish Riksbank. It is the world's oldest central bank. Similarly, the second oldest federal bank is known as United States Federal Reserve. Similarly, in case of UK, the central bank is called as Bank of England. And no points in guessing which is India's central bank. It is the Reserve Bank of India. Understood? So this is the fundamental differences between commercial bank and central bank. I hope each and every difference between these two kind of institutions are covered. Do not worry. What are different types of commercial banks? I've only touched upon the topic. I've told you the difference. There are two types of commercial banks, public sector and private sector. What are the more differences between the two? We'll cover it later on. No need to worry. So I hope this is the first differences that has made you understand economy in a better. So from tomorrow onwards, or from the next class onwards, from Monday, we'll start covering what is RBI and how RBI functions. Basically, we'll try to emphasize on role of RBI, and RBI has multiple roles. It not just acts as a banker to the government and banker to other banks, but it is also responsible for issuing of banknotes. It is also responsible for offering debt to the governments, right? So it can also be called as a debt manager of the government. All the other roles of RBI we'll cover later on one by one, okay? So please stay tuned to our channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see each other again on Monday at same time, that is 6 p.m. Have a very good day.